Good afternoon. This is Rabbi Sachs coming to you from the Chai Center, and welcome to the Chai Academy. So, the Chai Academy is various classes of Jewish interest, some Torah, some Mishnah, some Kabbalah, some history, some just thoughts, fleeting thoughts, simple thoughts. We have been discussing over the past few days sort of the history of the Balfour Declaration versus the White Paper versus the antagonism of Muslims to Jews. What's the origin? What's the origin of Christian? And different things like that. So we got into sort of modern day Israel. And yesterday we discussed in the previous class, which you can see at thechaicenter.com/academy. There's a host of classes, 150, maybe more, classes that you can choose from, each one encapsulated, so you don't have to rely on the previous class. So essentially, just a recap. There was the Lord Balfour. He drafted something, and he got it approved by Parliament. He drafted something called the Balfour Declaration, which its mission was to create a homeland for the Jewish people in what was called Palestine. This was 1917. And truly a mensch and a hero and an incredible person. However, in 1939, there was anti-Semitism reared its ugly head, and the British drafted something called the White Paper, which negated everything the Balfour Declaration. And they sent a clear message to the world, to the Jews, to Hitler, that we don't really care. And they allowed 75,000 Jews in total over a 5-year period, which, by the way, I was recently learned that only 50,000+ were given in that 5-year period. So even the 16,000 per year that they promised, they didn't fulfill. So the British were really persona non grata when it came to Israel. They didn't handle it right. Churchill tried to help, but he was completely outvoted. It was basically 38-2, and he could not change the White Paper, and the White Paper became a symbol really of incompetence and hate for the Jewish people. So there was a fellow who helped Balfour understand the importance of a Jewish state, and he's actually credited in part in convincing Balfour to write the Balfour Declaration, and his name is Chaim Weizmann, and they call him Weizmann, but Weiz, right? So there's legend has it that Chaim Weizmann developed TNT during World War I, right? And that allowed them to create various munitions and so he developed the TNT, and as a reward, he was given Palestine and the Balfour Declaration. So part of it is true, and the other part is not true. The part that's true is Chaim Weizmann, who was an ardent Zionist. He followed Theodor Herzl's philosophy that the Jews need their own place. Herzl, I don't know if he cared so much it was in Israel or not in Israel, but the idea that Jews should have their own place. However, Chaim Weizmann was he didn't pursue it as a career. He was a chemist. And when he was 30 years old, he became a professor in the university in Manchester, England. So and he contacted Lord Balfour as the prime minister when he was prime minister. He met him a few times, and and Balfour had nothing to offer him. He says, I don't really know how to help you. I don't know what the answer is here. I don't know what to help you. Um, and now, so it's initially it took 10 years, by the way, for Balfour to come around. So initially, why Balfour didn't initially. Chaim Weizmann and Balfour, they had a relationship, they had a communication, but Lord Balfour didn't help, and Chaim Weizmann didn't give up. It is true that Chaim Weizmann did he developed something called acetone, and this acetone basically is part of cordite that goes in to make explosives. I mean, I'm sure there are scientists who will watch this and say, okay, he clearly doesn't know, and that is true. That is true. So he developed something called acetone, which was used in explosives, and he was considered, by the way, he was considered somebody who helped Britain win World War One because of his efforts. But 10 years later, when Lord Balfour was no longer the prime minister, but he was the foreign secretary, Weizmann influenced Balfour to do something for Israel, do something. And so was it a reward, or was it just a friendship, or was Weizmann, or was Balfour just his eyes were opened? They did have a relationship, clearly. So Balfour went ahead, and he was a righteous Gentile, and he went ahead and he drafted this Balfour Declaration, which helped the Jews. What's interesting is when Lord Balfour passed, and in 1939 the British drafted the White Paper, which is a vile document, and it's once again it's a blight and a stain. When they drafted someone like Ben Gurion, for example, was furious at the British, and so all Jews across the world were furious, but Weizmann, he said, don't they still help Jews, don't, and he was almost more of a pacifist, and he was criticized greatly, and they told him you're more of an Anglophobe than you are a Jew, and they weren't appreciative of Weizmann's, I guess, long-term vision. Now, when the Jews in these, basically those that were fighting for independence, they killed a high up officer, officer or just a high up person in maybe politician, the highest outside England territory, in Cairo. His name was Lord Moyne, and he was assassinated. And by the way, his Jewish assassinators were also assassinated. Weizmann condemned it. He condemned it. He says, we're not going to get anywhere with this type of thing. And he was really there were those that liked him, and there those that disliked him. But he always viewed himself as a patriot, and he was disturbed when Lord Moyne was killed, and most of those that fought for the independence, were quite happy that Lord Moyne was killed in Cairo to teach the Brits a lesson. He used to visit President Truman Weizmann. He had a relationship with him. Truman used to have a nickname for Weizmann. He called him the Old Doctor, So, and he was the one that actually convinced Truman to really you gotta help the Jewish people. So Weizmann was all over the place, and Weizmann was quite an interesting personality, an important personality. He was duped towards the end of his life. So Ben Gurion went over to Weizmann and he says, "I'll tell you what, I'm going to be prime minister, and you're going to be president." The very first president of Israel. And Weizmann gladly accepted. What he did not know was that, and as we know even till today, the presidential position in Israel has no teeth. It's more political. It's more fanfare. It's more, it's fluff. It doesn't really have that much teeth. He's an icon, a figurehead, but it doesn't. And he once said, allegedly, he once said that the only thing I stick my nose into these days is a handkerchief, as he wasn't involved in politics. He had no decision making. He had no power, etc. However, even in Israel, he made his mark. And he died in 1952, and there is the Weizmann Institute of Science, because he was a scientist and a chemist, and it is considered a very prestigious place, and that's because of his involvement, and it was also as a tribute to him. So today, even in Israel today, the president doesn't do much. Yes, he can break a tie like our vice president can. But the prime minister is the one that has all the power, and the president has pretty much he's there for the pictures. Probably not dissimilar to the Queen of England, who has no power now, and it changed. The monarchy used to have a lot of power, but now the Queen is there as an icon. And she can trace her lineage all the way to the ancient kings of England. So she's not just a newcomer or outlier. She's really part and parcel of the royal family, whatever that means. They say that the royal family, they call it blue blood. So I don't know if you're familiar with the origin of blue blood. So if you absorb too much silver makes your lips turn blue. So while the commoner never ate on sterling silver cutlery, the monarchs did, and the royal families did. So therefore they're considered the blue bloods, because their lips sometimes turn blue. Now, so Weizmann, even though the white paper was aggravating, he still was loyal to Britain, and where other Jews were not. That changed. When Britain went to war against Hitler, and they got involved in World War II, the Jews and the Jewish organizations backed Britain, because it was more important to back Britain than to be angry at Britain. They had to win this war. It was do or die. So the Jewish organizations, so Ben Gurion backed Britain, and even the Irgun. The Irgun was eventually taken over by Menachem Begin, but the Irgun was founded originally by Zev Jabotinsky, right? And there was also a fellow by the name of David Raziel. They were a militant group, and they were serious. We'll talk about them as we move along. They were serious business. They were very militant, and they thought really they would do anything. But once the war broke out, Irgun backed off over fighting the Brits and fighting the British army. Once again, they saw it as a priority. You have to defeat Hitler before you can worry about Brits in Palestine. All eyes were focused on defeating Hitler. That's that famous line that Ben Gurion said, that we will fight Hitler you know, without the white paper, and we'll fight the white paper without Hitler. So it was the one thing at a time. So David Raziel, who was the head of the Irgun, one of the leaders of the Irgun, which was a militant movement, he was actually killed on a British mission in 1941 in Iraq. So even though he was a leader of the Irgun, a leader of the militant, real militants, we'll talk about Jabotinsky, and we'll talk about the David Raziel more. They stopped, and they went all out for Britain to fight the Nazis. There was one group that did not back Britain. They just wanted Britain, the United Kingdom, England out of Palestine. Out of Palestine. You did the white paper, we hate you, out of Palestine. And that was actually called the Lehi, the Freedom Fighters for Palestine. They were they were led by somebody called Abraham Stern. You probably heard of the Stern Group. So Abraham Stern, and he felt, and his people that followed him felt, that Britain is so vulnerable that they don't want a war on both fronts. So now's the time to really get them out of town. So they continued fighting the Brits, and they were the ones that killed Lord Moyne in Cairo in 1941. Abraham Stern, he didn't only fight the British, he fought anybody that got in his way. So there's a famous story of him robbing a bank, which was Jews in Tel Aviv. And when two tellers refused to give him money, he shot them both. So he killed fellow Jews, and he says, like a rabbi who carries his tefillin bag, right, his tallis bag. He says, in my bag I carry a gun, right? So he was, so he wasn't. It was anybody that got in his way. And we'll talk more about the Lehi. They were warriors. They were fierce. It's interesting then what history said about them and what history is saying about them now. We kind of understand where they were coming from. They were crazed that Jewish people were being killed in Europe, and they needed to stop the blockade. They needed to get, and if the only way to stop the blockade is by getting rid of the British, they would do it. And as we said yesterday, but they ran a risk. I don't know if they thought about this, that if they got the Brits out of the way, would that have been an opening for the Germans to come in and just continue the blockade or kill Jews, Germans killing Jews in Israel. By the way, Abraham Stern, was eventually assassinated. And it's interesting history that one of the people that took over there was three leaders of the Stern, of the Lehi. One of the leaders to eventually take over was none other than Yitzhak Shamir. So Yitzhak Shamir, of course, was the Prime Minister of Israel. Yitzhak Shamir was my height. He was very short, and Yitzhak Shamir was he was, to save a Jewish life meant everything to him, right? And he went up toe to toe against leaders of the free world, leaders of the not free world, and they were, they stood at 6 foot. He stood at 5 foot. Or I don't know if he was even 5 foot. He stood there and he said, I am not doing I will only do what's best for Israel. I'm not doing what's best for you. So he actually became a leader of the Stern Group. So it's interesting. Many of the players that we've heard of were all, whether it's Menachem Begin or Shamir or Ben Gurion, they made some extremely tough decisions. Some of them, by the way, are not viewed as righteous, right? As we'll discuss, Ben Gurion with his decisions were not viewed as righteous. Begin, history is split on Begin, but the idea that it was troubling times. They weren't. If while it's true that the war did end in 1945, but no one had any way of knowing that. But if them not smuggling in Jews and then not getting the weaponry they needed within Israel, who knows how many more Jews would have been killed. I believe, I for one, while I don't condone violence ever, I believe that they are on the right side of history. Stern clearly was wrong. You don't kill an innocent bank teller. You don't do that. Is there any similarity between the riots of the Black Lives Matter and the killings and the maimings and the? So there is something. However, these leaders of the Israeli leaders were not, aside from the story that I just told you with Abraham Stern, they did not kill or destroy indiscriminately. Right? They targeted certain people, certain buildings. They targeted because they needed to send a message that we will not stop this terrorism until we get our way. But they didn't go around smashing businesses and unless it was owned by a British officer, that type of thing. So so I've thought about this. I've struggled with it. But that is my thoughts on the matter. All right, we will end here a little shorter today, and we will convene not tomorrow. I have 2 funerals back to back. We will convene on Thursday. May the Schwartz be with you. thechaicenter.com/academy. Be well.